Hello and welcome. Before we begin, I invite you to make yourself as comfortable as possible. Find a cozy position, allow your body to settle, and if you can, dim the lights around you so the atmosphere feels calm and restful. I'd love to know more about you, so when you're able, please write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these videos can travel, and I'm genuinely curious about the places and times where you join me. If you find this video soothing, please remember to like it and subscribe. That Sin Collection helps the video reach others who might also need some rest tonight. My true wish is that you don't make it to the end of this video, because somewhere along the way, you drifted off into peaceful sleep. That would be the best outcome of all. And if there are other topics you'd like me to create future videos about, please feel free to suggest them in the comments. I want this space to be one where you feel listened to and cared for. Now, let's begin. The mountain air was thinner here, cleaner than the smogged skies of Chengdu. As the bus wound its way into the valley of Lugu Lake, Lamu Zhouma pressed her forehead against the window and breathed deeply. The water stretched like polished silver, reflecting the green ridges that rose protectively around it. Small fishing boats dotted the shallows, their oars gliding in slow rhythm. For months, she had dreamed of this view, the cradle of her people, the Mosuo. Here, she was not Luna, the anthropology student, but Zhouma, daughter of the Zhouma household and future matriarch of her family line. Her arrival was no small matter. Word had traveled faster than the bus. Zhouma was coming home. By the time she stepped off the dusty road, the village had gathered. Wooden houses, their roofs shingled and eaves painted in bold reds and yellows, leaned against the backdrop of terraced fields that glowed golden with barley. Smoke curled from kitchen chimneys, carrying the savory promise of roasted pork and garlic. Her grandmother, tall-backed despite her years, her hair bound in a crown of braids, stepped forward first. Around her, aunts, uncles, cousins, and siblings followed, their voices rising in song. The Mosuo did not greet with silence. They welcomed with melody. Women sang verses that praised the returning child. Men answered in deep harmonies, while children giggled and clutched Luna's hands, tugging her toward the courtyard. Inside her grandmother's house, the hearth glowed. It was the sacred center, the place where fire never fully died, even in the depths of winter. The family had prepared a feast, clay bowls brimmed with steaming butter tea, thick and salty, its surface glistening with melted yak butter. Barley wine, brewed cloudy and sweet, was poured generously. Plates of roasted pork, glistening with spice, sat beside baskets of flatbread and fresh vegetables from the terraces. "Zhouma has returned," one of the elders proclaimed, lifting his bowl. From the city, from the world of strangers, back to the land of her mothers. Luna bowed her head, humbled and warmed by the familiar cadence of the Mosuo tongue. She was used to Mandarin at the university, to professors correcting her essays in clipped tones, to classmates calling her Luna because it was easier on their tongues. But here, Zhouma was spoken with pride, as if her very name bound her to the soil beneath her feet. As the evening deepened, the celebration grew louder. Young women in embroidered jackets danced in a circle, their sleeves fluttering with wings. Men joined with long flutes, filling the air with a sound at once haunting and joyful. Yak butter lamps flickered in every window, throwing gold light against the dark timber of the walls. Luna found herself drawn into the world of movement, her body remembering steps she had learned as a child. Her city self slipped away. She was home, every gesture infused with the rhythm of her people. Later, when the dancing quieted and the wine settled into warm laughter, her grandmother pulled her close. "Zhouma," she said, voice lined with age, yet steady as stone. "You carry our name. You will carry this household when I am gone." The words were not a burden, but a mantle. Luna felt the weight of them, heavier than her textbooks, heavier than the essays she had written about other cultures while professors overlooked her own. Here, she was not just a student. She was the heir. The household, the fields, the family's memory, all of it would one day flow through her hands. She slipped away for a moment into the courtyard, the night air cool against her flushed skin. Above her stretched a quilt of stars, so thick it made her dizzy. She thought of the name she had chosen in the city, Luna, Latin for moon. There, it had seemed elegant, a bridge into the world of academia, a name that belonged in lecture halls and dormitory conversations. But here, under the unbroken gaze of the real moon, she remembered why her grandmother called her Zhouma. It was not just a name. It was a lineage, a promise. She whispered it aloud. Zhouma, letting the syllables settle into the night. Inside, laughter swelled again, and the sound of flutes carried over the water. Her people had welcomed her home, and though her life was split between two worlds, tonight she belonged wholly to one. The morning heat rose like a soft breath from the dark stones of the courtyard. Luna stepped out with a bowl of warm porridge balanced in both hands, the steam curling into the cool mountain air. Around her, the household stirred, a cousin pounding barley in a hallowed log, a young aunt sweeping the raised platform, a pair of boys chasing a skittish hen past the herb racks. The rhythm of work was quiet and precise, a choreography learned by generations who rose with the sun and slept with the stars. She had intended a simple day. Show her grandmother the notes from her last seminar. Help fold the newly woven blankets. Give an impromptu lesson in Mandarin to her youngest cousin. After weeks of lectures and libraries and the rush of Kunming, this valley felt like a slow, forgiving world. Her city name, Luna, slipped from her lips with a taste of distant coffee. Here, when cousins called, it was always Zhouma. The two names had lived in her, like two halves of a river meeting in the same bedrock. She paused at the foot of the central hearth when a voice, unmistakably not a Mosuo voice, called her name in hesitant Mandarin. Luna? Lamu Zhouma? She turned. At the lane's threshold stood a young man with tired, earnest face. He held a satchel too small for his travel dust, and a camera hung awkwardly around his neck. He wore the wrong clothes for mountain work, jeans and a shirt from some city shop, and he carried a notebook whose dog-eared pages betrayed nights of study. Up close, his blue eyes were a shade of curiosity she'd seen in freshman seminars, a bright, unguarded want to know. Dandiel, he said, as if the name were a talisman. His Mandarin stumbled sometimes, colliding with English consonants. I had to see it. I'm sorry I came without telling you. Luna felt the courtyard tilt the degree. She had not wanted him to come. She had refused the casual request 2 nights ago. A polite no via message, a gentle explanation that family time in the valley was private, not an exhibit for outsiders. But the wordless insistence in his face now, the hope, the bravado softened by exhaustion, made her cheeks warm with an embarrassment she hadn't expected. Before she could frame a reply, her grandmother had stood at the doorway. The old woman's eyes were small and endless, taking in Daniel with a look that unrolled his intentions as if he were a foreign cloth under inspection. Around them, the household slowed like the breath of a bird, listening for a storm. The children dropped their games and edged closer, curious in the way only young ones are when an unfamiliar face appears at the hearth. An aunt who braided yak hair into bright tassels came forward, fingers sticky with dough. "Who is this?" she asked, not unkind, but cautious. The Mosuo did not slam their doors at strangers. Hospitality was like breath here, given freely. But certain thresholds, the hearth, the sleeping house, the inner courtyard, were not for casual crossing. Daniel offered his hands, palms wide, in a practiced gesture learned at the university. "I'm Daniel from the exchange program," he said. "Luna and we studied together in Kunming. I wanted to see where she grew up." The grandmother's jaw curled, not unkindly. In the Mosuo household, lineage and roof were not tokens to display. Families protected their hearts like a sacred text. That protection was not born of fear, but of care. Only those who knew the rules could enter fully. Luna stepped forward, a small apology on her tongue. "He shouldn't have come," she said in their tongue, the syllables soft as pressed petals. She added, for Daniel's benefit, in halting Mandarin, "This is my home. Please come in, but please respect it." He nodded so earnestly that she felt the edges of her annoyance melt. "Of course," he said. "Yes, thank you." Children were circles of motion, and the youngest tugged at his sleeve, fascinated by the camera. One cousin plucked up the courage to ask, in the local dialect, "Do you have mothers at home like ours? Who cooks for you?" Daniel laughed, a short, bright sound. He answered with a clumsy charm that translated poorly into the rhythm of the valley. My family, yes, but it's different." That word, different, hung between them like steam on the path. The household listened more than spoke. Daniel's questions, however sincere, floated like pebbles across the water. They barely made ripples in a lake that had been still for generations. Aunties set before him a plate of roasted pork, glazed with a tangle of herbs and a few slices of mountain radish, crunchy and cold. He ate with polite hunger, praising flavors that were the valley's weather more than its food. Each compliment made the elder smile slightly, the way a good traveler who respects a house's simple rules might be permitted further in. Luna felt herself both protector and interpreter, the boundary between home and outsider. She walked Daniel through the outer rooms, pointing out the family's woven patterns on the loom, the rack where dried peppers hung like strings of tiny suns, the wooden cradle carved with a dolphin motif that had rocked her cousins for decades. She watched his eyes trace the grains of the wood, saw him study the way the house sat with one wall open toward the lake to catch the evening winds. He asked about everything with a hungry, measured tone of a man, the longing for understanding. What's this for? Who made this? How long has they stood? At the edge of the yard, a woman nailed fresh tatami onto a platform while humming an old chant. Men return from the fields with a bamboo pole of harvested grain, their shoulders heavy and steady. Daniel watched, taking notes in the margins of his notebook, his pen scratching like a small, awkward bird. The day thickened and softened. Sunlight bent toward afternoon, and the scent of wood smoke grew deeper. In the corner of the compound, an old man, a maternal uncle, sat with his back to the house, braided mustache catching the light. He was older than Daniel's father might have been, his hands creased with lines like maps. He watched Luna and the young man with a blank, patient attention of someone who had seen many patterns repeat. He nodded once, a small respectful indication, then returned to shelling beans and speaking with his cousin about which terraces needed fencing. At one point, Daniel asked the question Luna had dreaded by the hearth. "Do you have a husband?" His voice faltered between curiosity and the learned assumption that this was a step in a conventional courtship. "Not in the way you mean," Luna answered, gentle but clear. "Here, we live in a mother's home. Husbands don't sleep under the same roof. Love is like visiting, a walking marriage. Children live with a mother." She watched him as she said it, watching not to teach, but to gauge the shape his understanding would take. He listened, a patient student, and then asked 100 small questions. "So the men don't claim the children?" "The men, do they work like fathers?" Each question broke the assumptions they carried, as if he pressed at the seam between two ways of life and watched them hold. At midday, the women called everyone to sit. Luna's grandmother presided with a quiet sternness, softened only by eyes that remembered many winters. The family ate together in a long communal line around the hearth. This was more than a meal. It was a living map that marked who belonged where. By late afternoon, Daniel asked to see the lake. Moonlight and evening fishing were not ceremonies for show. They were the household's pulse. They walked along the worn stone path to the water's edge. Daniel kneeled at the bank, scooping clear, cold water over his hands and splashing his face. The wind of the lake smelled of algae and wet stone, and for the first time, his expression relaxed into a human softness. He spoke softly as they watched the small fishing boats return. "It's beautiful," he said. It doesn't feel like anything I've read. It feels honest. Luna looked at him, really looked, and felt the thinness of the barrier between explanation and belonging. He could speak of beauty, of honesty, but to belong to this place required something less romantic and more durable. Acceptance of a life ordered by women, a willingness to be a visitor and a helper rather than an owner. Night fell as children chase firelight. Daniel, hands now roughened by grips on oars, had become for a moment less of an intruder and more of a person trying to understand. When the family finally gathered to rest, Luna showed him where he might sleep. The extra mat by the outer wall, under a cedar beam heavy with the scent of stored winter. He thanked her in the halting Mandarin that had become their shorthand and offered a small gift, a pressed page from his notebook, a poem he had written in English about lakes. She smiled and promised to keep it. It was a small exchange, a bridge in paper. That night, as the household settled, the matriarch lit the last yak butter lamp and walked the rooms in ritual, whispering names and watching the faces of her family. She paused by the door where Daniel would sleep. The glance that passed between her and Luna was a quiet shape of meaning. She would see him tonight. Her family would notice him tomorrow. The night held its breath. Luna lay awake on the thin mat, the house's life whispering around her. Daniel's arrival, uninvited and earnest, had unfolded its small drama. She let the sound of the house feel her ears, the slow breathing of cousins, the creak of doors settling, the soft scrape of early rain against the eaves. In the dark, she rehearsed how she would explain, again more calmly, that this roof sheltered a line of women, that history and land and name flowed through mothers, that a man's love here was a visit that could be treasured and respected without changing ownership. Somewhere beyond the sleeping village, the mountains stood like patient keepers. The night had accepted Daniel's curious trespass. The morning would shape it. Luna closed her eyes, feeling both the warmth of welcome and the chill of a boundary politely crossed. She had asked him not to come for reasons that were not unkind. Now he had come, and the house would decide, in its slow way, what to do next. Morning rose clear and cold, with the mist still clinging to the lake, like a sheet that the sun had not yet dared to lift. The courtyard smelt of a damp wood and barley husks, and smoke spiraled from the hearth in a blue-gray column that melted into the pale sky. Luna was already awake. dressed in her village clothes. A long, dark skirt, a jacket embroidered with red and green threads, her hair tied in the traditional braid. She moved lightly, balancing a basket of grain, her eyes half closed, as if she were still lingering in dreams. Daniel followed her in a respectful distance, blinking at the mountain light, his notebook tucked under his arm. He thought he was going to share another day of quiet meals and observations. But as they stepped back into the main room, he noticed something different. The atmosphere had thickened. The women of the household were gathered close to the fire pit, their shawls folded neatly around them, their faces composed. A few uncles sat at the edges, their rough hands clasped, their expressions unreadable. Even the children had been instructed to sit still, though they fidgeted, their wide eyes darting between Daniel and the elders. The matriarch, Luna's grandmother, sat in the central place near the hearth flame, her presence like a carved pillar holding up the house. Her silver hair was pinned with turquoise beads, and her hands rested upon her knees, as steady as stone. When she lifted her eyes to Daniel, he felt the strange sensation of being measured, not as an individual, but as a set of intentions, weighed and sorted with precision. Luna, the grandmother said in their dialect, though her gaze never left Daniel. This guest is your classmate, yes? Yes, Amma, Luna answered softly, switching into Mosuo, from the university. The grandmother nodded once, then spoke in slow, careful Mandarin, her accent deep and rough, but her meaning sharp. Guest from far away, do you know whose roof you sit under? Daniel straightened, startled by the solemnity. Yes, ma'am, he said, fumbling with formality. I know I am in Luna's home, with her family. I thank you for your welcome. A murmur rippled among the women. The grandmother's lips curved faintly, though her eyes remained stern. She lifted a ladle of butter tea and set it before him. He received it with both hands, remembering the etiquette Luna had explained, and drunk. The salty, thick taste seemed heavier this morning, a ritual more than refreshment. When he lowered the cup, an uncle cleared his throat. His voice was gravel, but it carried. Young man, he said in Mandarin, softened by dialect. In your land, men are heads of the house, yes? Daniel hesitated, then admitted. Mostly, yes. Traditionally, men. He faltered, unsure how to phrase it. Men are seen as leaders. The uncle leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped. Here, that is not so. Here, the house belongs to the women. The grandmother, the mother, the sisters. They hold the land, the children. A man comes to visit, not to command. Do you understand? Daniel flushed. He nodded quickly. Yes, I understand. Another aunt spoke, her tone gentle but firm. If you wish to walk with our Luna, you must know this. You will not bring her to your house. You will walk with hers. You will not give your name to her children. They will carry her name. Live in her mother's house and follow her line. Are you ready for that? The words were simple, yet their weight settled on him like stones. Daniel had thought himself prepared. He had read articles, heard Luna speak of walking marriages in class. But hearing it now, in this fire-lit circle, surrounded by the generations who lived it daily, it struck him as something more than a cultural fact. It was a living expectation, a binding thread. He tried to speak, but the words came slowly. In my country, people think family must have one house, one father, one mother. Children take the father's name. He paused, looking into the fire. But I see here it is different, and I don't want to disrespect that. I only want to understand and to be with her if she wants. A silence followed, broken only by the hiss of the firewood. The grandmother finally spoke, her voice calm and edged with wisdom. Understand first, then choose. This is our way. A man may come to a woman's room at night. At dawn, he leaves, returning to his own mother's home. Love is not possession here. It is a visit, a gift. To stay with Luna means to accept this truth, or to walk away. Daniel felt every eye on him. He swallowed. He glanced at Luna, who sat still, her eyes lowered, her hands folded. She had not spoken a word during the exchange. It was not her place to defend him or explain him. The decision was his, and the judgment would come from the family. Finally, he nodded. I understand, he said, though he knew the fullness of understanding would take more than this moment. I want to learn more, and I want to respect your way. The grandmother leaned back, the lines of her face softening. She gave a single nod, neither acceptance nor rejection, but acknowledgement. A cousin brought a bowl of roasted barley, and the gathering shifted from interpellation to meal. Conversation rose again. Laughter returned in small waves, and the children began to chatter. But Daniel knew that this morning had been no casual breakfast. It had been a test, a doorway. He had stepped through, but whether he would remain inside or be turned gently back was yet to be decided. Luna finally looked up and met his eyes. In her gaze was both relief and caution, a silent message that said, "This is only the beginning." Outside, the mist lifted slowly from the lake, revealing the rippling surface beneath. The mountains stood watch, patient and unmoving, as they had for centuries. The morning's fire circle had left an invisible weight in the air. Even as the family resumed its daily routines, Daniel carried with him the memory of the grandmother's eyes, the aunt's firm voice, the uncle's gravel-edged words. He had been welcomed, but in the same breath, he had been warned. Luna, noticing his silence, invited him to walk with her. Together, they crossed the courtyard and followed a path. The land itself seemed like a living family member, layered with barley, potatoes, and beans that fed the households, ringed by forests that supplied fuel and shelter. The sound of water trickling down irrigation channels kept pace with her steps, an ancient heartbeat that had sustained her people for centuries. "This," Luna said, gesturing to the terraces, "is why women here are the center of the home. Land never leaves the mother's line. When a grandmother dies, the house still belongs to her daughters. Sons go to their sisters' children. Nothing is ever lost. It is always passed on." Daniel nodded, watching a group of women bend low to weed, their wide-brimmed hats bobbing. He wanted to ask a dozen questions, but the gravity of the explanation kept him quiet. They arrived at the grandmother's house, the Yidu, the big house of the family. Its walls of darkened timber broke the marks of generations, and its broad roof sloped heavily, like a bird folding its wings. Luna led him through the doorway, and inside, the hearth glowed, a square fire pit with 3 stones set in a triangle, blackened by time. The ceiling above was smoky, the beams lined with hanging tools, dried meats, and woven bags. "This fire," Luna said, kneeling for a moment, "has burned since before I was born. It never goes out, except when the family dies. Here, decisions are made. Marriages, death, birth, harvest, all are spoken beside this flame." Daniel crouched near her, feeling the warmth, inhaling the scent of resin and yak butter. He thought of his own family home in Oregon, where decisions were made around polished kitchen tables, beneath electric lights. It seemed suddenly pale compared to this fire, this weight of continuity that was both practical and sacred. They left the house and walked toward the lake. The path wound between fields, then opened to a wide expanse of water that mirrored the sky. The sacred lake Glugu lay before them, its surface silver blue, fringed with reeds. On the far shore, mountains leaned down as if guarding the waters. "This is our ancestors' place," Luna explained softly. "We say spirits live in the lake. We give offerings, wine, food, songs. Here we ask for health, for harmony, for children." Daniel stood still, the wind lifting his hair, the scent of pine sharp in his nose. He felt small before the lake, not as a tourist, but as a man who had stumbled into a world that would continue long after him. They sat on a smooth rock by the shore. For a time, neither spoke. Only the lapping of the water filled the silence. At last, Daniel said, "Now I understand why you told me not to come." Luna turned her face toward him, her braid trailing across her shoulders. Her expression was neither hard nor soft, but measured, like the elders. "Yes," she said, "because this world is not easy for outsiders to understand. People from the city, even from Chengdu, call us old-fashioned, strange. Some think we are immoral. Others romanticize us, like we live in paradise. Both are wrong. This life, it is strong, but it is fragile. If someone comes here without respect, even love can destroy it." Daniel felt the words got deeper than any reprimand. "And you were afraid of me." "I was afraid," Luna admitted, her voice gentler now, "that you would see me as something exotic, that you would want to love me as if I were a story, not a person, that you would never really accept that here women lead and men follow, that you would try to change me, or worse, pity me." Daniel dropped his gaze. The breeze rattled the reeds. Her honesty left no space for defense. But Luna watched him closely, and what she saw surprised her. He did not bristle. He did not argue. He simply listened, shoulders bowed, like a student before a teacher. She remembered him in their anthropology classes, always scribbling notes, always asking questions, his curiosity sometimes clumsy, but never mocking. You stayed through the questions this morning, she said after a moment. Most would have left, humiliated. I didn't want to leave, Daniel said, finally lifting his eyes. Even if I looked foolish, I wanted to learn. I don't know if I can ever be part of this world the way you are, but I can try to understand, and I can respect. Something softened in Luna then, though she did not show it openly. She looked back at the lake, at the mountains reflecting in its mirrored surface. She thought of the countless women before her, grandmothers, mothers, aunts, who had held families together, passed down land, raised children in the rhythm of balance. And for the first time since Daniel's arrival, she wondered. Perhaps his presence was not only intrusion, but a mirror, a way to see her own culture anew through the eyes of someone who had never known it. The sun slipped lower, casting gold across the water. A flock of birds cut across the sky, their wings beating in unison. Luna drew her knees to her chest, deep in thought. Daniel, beside her, said nothing more, but in his silence there was humility. And though she would not admit it aloud, Luna felt the first thread of possibility weaving between them, delicate, uncertain, yet strong enough to make her wonder. By the time the festival arrived, the whole village had taken on a charge, like the air before a storm. Not heavy, but expectant. Word had traveled from house to house, terraces to boats, calling everyone to gather by the lake at nightfall. The day itself had been a whirl of preparation. Women pounded millet into flour. Men slaughtered pigs and goats, and children carried baskets of pine branches to stack for the fires. Bright fabric streamers were tied to door frames and fence posts, fluttering like prayer flags. The fragrance of roasting meat mingled with the sweet, nutty scent of barley cakes cooling on woven trays. Luna moved through it all with calm authority. Though she was young, her position as inheritor of her grandmother's house was unquestioned. Aunties handed her baskets of mushrooms for sorting. Cousins asked her how much wine to set aside for the elders. Even the older women paused now and then to consult her. She slipped into her role as if she had never left. Here, she was not Luna the student, not the cosmopolitan girl who drank espresso in Chengdu cafes. Here, she was Zhouma, her grandmother's heir. Daniel watched, both dazzled and unsettled. He had thought he knew her after years of shared lectures and evenings in the university library, where she sat across from him with hair tied back and laptop open. But here, she was someone else entirely. luminous in her embroidered vest, decisive in her commands, embraced in her net of kinship that stretched across the village. She belonged in a way he had never belonged anywhere. As dusk fell, the people gathered by the lake. Torches were lit, their flames trembling in the breeze, sending golden light dancing across the water. The mountains turned purple against the sinking sun. From somewhere deep in the cluster of houses came the first notes of a long, wooden horn, its low, wavering call answered by the rhythm of drums. The festival began. Circle dances formed near the water's edge. Women and men joined hands, moving counterclockwise, their steps measured and strong. Their voices rose in unison, chanting hymns to the mountain goddess, protector of the land, mother of balance. Songs told of harvests, of the lake itself that gave life. Luna stepped into the circle with her cousins. Her braid swung as she moved, her smile breaking wide as the rhythm carried her. She was radiant, not in the way of lovers or vanity, but in the deep sense of a person standing exactly where she was meant to be. Daniel stood back among the onlookers, his chest tightening. He had thought she was beautiful in Chengdu when she explained kinship terms on a whiteboard or leaned across a desk in a dim cafe. But here, her beauty was not just hers. It belonged to the land, the fire, the family that surrounded her. An elder noticed him and motioned for him to join the dance. Daniel hesitated. He wanted to, badly, but something inside warned him. This was not his place to enter. To step into that circle would be to claim equality he had not earned. He bowed his head politely, raising his hand in thanks, and stayed where he was. Instead, he watched, and in watching, he learned. He saw how the dances moved not around couples, but around the group, hands linked, feet stamping in rhythm. No one led, no one followed. The circle itself was the leader. He saw how the torches were not decorations but signals, fire offered to the ancestors across the lake. He saw how children were lifted into the rhythm, laughing, their small hands placed into the hands of grandmothers. This was not entertainment. This was continuity, an unbroken thread. At the height of the night, when the moon has raced above the ridge and painted the lake with silver, Luna stepped away from the dancers. She walked to the shore, carrying a small clay bowl. Daniel followed at a respectful distance. She knelt, scooping a little wine from the bowl, and poured it into the water. The ripples carried the offering outward. Then she whispered words in her mother tongue too soft for him to catch. Finally, she stood, looking at him. Her eyes were steady, unreadable. "This is my life," she said. "Not something I visit, not something I escape from. This fire, these dances, this water, they are me. If you want me, you must want all of this." Daniel felt the weight of the moment, heavier than the elder's questions, heavier even than his own confusion. And for once, he did not try to answer with promises. He simply looked back at her, nodded, and let the silence stand as its vowel. Behind them, the festival swelled again, torches burning bright, voices rising into the mountain air. Zhouma had returned, and her people had embraced her. And Daniel, still an outsider, finally understood that his place in her world would not be to lead, not even to walk beside her at every step, but to stand with respect, with humility, and with love enough to let her shine. Daniel lay awake on the woven mat in the small guest room of the grandmother's house. The night was quiet now. The festival songs had faded into the distance, replaced only by the faint hiss of wind moving down from the mountains. The fire from the hearth in the main room still glowed faintly, its smoke curling through the cracks of the wooden walls, carrying with it the scent of pine. He had traveled far before, but never had he felt this much like an outsider. Here, in the Mosuo village, everything he thought he knew about family, about love, about belonging, seemed reversed. His thoughts circled, restless. In his world, a man who marries builds a home that carries his name. He becomes the center, the anchor, the one whose authority is recognized. But here, in Zhouma's world, in Luna's world, the home did not belong to him, nor would it ever. It was her grandmother's house, her mother's house, and someday hers. If he stayed, he would be a visitor under her roof, his presence welcome, but never permanent. Daniel turned on his side, staring at the beams above. The realization was not bitter, only humbling. This would never be Daniel's house. It would always be Luna's house, and perhaps he thought that was the point. Then another thought rose, sharper, more unsettling. What if there was another man? The whispers he had overheard during the festival returned to him. The Mosuo did not practice marriage as he knew it. They had what outsiders called walking marriages. A man could visit a woman at night, welcomed into her chamber, but when dawn came, he would walk back to his mother's house. He brought no authority with him, no claim over her. The relationship lasted only as long as she desired it. It struck Daniel as both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because it spoke of freedom, of trust, of bonds formed by choice rather than obligation. Terrifying because it meant that no matter what it felt, Luna could one day open her door to someone else, and that, too, would be accepted, even celebrated, as part of the balance of her culture. His jaw tightened at the thought. In his own culture, jealousy was expected, even justified. But here, to feel betrayed might only prove he had misunderstood everything. He rubbed his temples, as though studying for an exam he hadn't prepared for. Perhaps that was what this truly was. A test. He was, after all, an anthropology student. He had read of matrilineal societies before, in textbooks and classroom discussions, but reading about them and standing inside one were not the same thing. Here, the theory had become flesh. The questions were no longer academia abstractions. They were personal. Daniel whispered into the dark. Could I live like this? He imagined children, small feet pattering on the wooden floors of this very house. They would bear Luna's surname, not his. Their place in the lineage would flow through her line, not his. His role would be acknowledged, yes, but not in the way he had always assumed a father's role to be. Would his pride accept that? Would his family, far across the ocean, understand it? The wind rattled softly against the shutters, as if the mountain itself was listening. Daniel closed his eyes, forcing his mind to stillness. He remembered Luna's face as she stood by the hearth earlier, her grandmother's hands resting lightly on her arm. The way she belonged to this place, as naturally as fire belonged to flame. She was not torn between worlds, not really. She was Zhouma here, always, even if she played at being Luna in the city. And what of him? Could he ever belong in her world without trying to bend it to his own? A quiet ache settled in his chest. He was not sure. He breathed deeply, recalling the words one of the elders had said earlier in the day. Words meant half as a warning, half as a test. Here, the woman holds the house. Are you ready for that? Daniel did not answer then, and he could not answer now. Yet, somewhere beneath the uncertainty, there was also awe. Perhaps this was what drew him here. Not only Luna herself, but the possibility of a different way of living, a challenge to everything he thought was fixed. The night deepened. He turned again on his mat, pulling the blanket close. His last thought before sleep was not an answer, but a question that lingered in him like an ember. Am I brave enough to live in her world? The fire outside crackled faintly. The lake breathed against the shore, and the village slept, carrying on as it always had, matrilineal, unbroken, waiting for dawn.